Hello and welcome to this informative video on the current political posturing surrounding the US debt ceiling. It's a topic that generates a lot of hysteria, with many politicians and media outlets warning of a potential financial crisis and collapse if the US government were to default on its debts. However, anyone who's been paying attention for a while knows that there's a nearly 100% chance that the parties involved will raise the debt ceiling, and the US will continue to add to its already massive $30 trillion plus debt. But despite this, the political posturing over the debt ceiling continues, offering the media a chance to spread fear about a potential default and its consequences. One key component of this strategy is convincing people that the United States has never defaulted on its financial obligations before, and that any default would result in a step into the great unknown, a financial crisis, and a calamity. The current Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, is at the forefront of this campaign, repeating her often used claim that the US has never defaulted on its debts, and that America has paid all of its bills on time since 1789. But the reality is that the US government has defaulted on its debts multiple times in the past, and if we expand the definition of default to include the idea of inflating away a government's debt in real terms, default has been even more common. Let's look at the most notorious case of default in US history, the 1934 default on Liberty bonds. In 1934, the US defaulted on the fourth Liberty bond. The contracts between debtor and creditor were clear: the bonds were to be payable in gold. But the US was facing massive debts in the 1930s after World War I, and the interest payments alone were draining the treasury of gold. The total debt was $22 billion, and there was no way to pay the principal when it became due in 1938, let alone meet expenses and other debt obligations. To deal with this, President Roosevelt decided to default on the whole of the domestically held debt by refusing to redeem in gold to Americans. Congress passed the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, which devalued the dollar from $20.67 per ounce to $35 per ounce, a reduction of 40%. The U.S. offered to pay its creditors in paper dollars, but only in new, devalued dollars, effectively defaulting on these Liberty bonds. The second, less severe case of default occurred in 1979, when the U.S. failed to make timely payments on some $122 million in Treasury bills amid computer malfunctions and high demand from small investors. The Treasury characterized the problem as a delay, but it was promptly sued by bondholders for breach of contract. And while outright repudiation of contracts is one way of defaulting, another is to deliberately devalue a nation's currency, i.e., inflate it, to devalue the amount of debt a government owns in real terms. Investors view this as a real form of avoiding debt obligations, and history is full of examples of governments using inflation to default on their debts. So, the claim that the US has never defaulted on its debts is simply untrue, and spreading this false information only serves to create fear and hysteria over the current political posturing surrounding the debt ceiling. In conclusion, while there's a high chance that the parties involved will raise the debt ceiling and the US will continue to add to its already massive debt, it's important to be aware of the historical reality of US defaults and to not be swayed by fear-mongering tactics. Thank you for watching and for taking the time to educate yourself on this important topic. Stay informed and stay critical of the information you're being presented with.